Glad to have you join us again, everyone. I am Adeshawa Josh, and this is Africa Matters. This week, we begin in Somalia, where newly elected President Hassan Sheikh Mohamud is taking office, facing a challenging 4 years in power. We'll also travel to Zimbabwe, where the government is encouraging farmers to move into wheat farming as global supplies dry up. And in Madagascar, we follow an NGO that's found a way to mitigate the impact of drought by using pigeon peas as the island nation battles climate change. On Sunday, Somalia's new president, Hassan Sheikh Mohamud, made history. He is the first Somali president to be elected for a second time after one of the most competitive elections ever held in the country. President Mohamud won in a landslide with 214 votes after 3 rounds of voting by Somali legislators. The 66-year-old's ruling Union for Peace and Development Party commands a majority of seats in the upper and lower house legislative chambers. His supporters spilled into the streets of the Somali capital Mogadishu in jubilation, expressing their hopes for the future.
We welcome the victory of the President-elect Hassan Sheikh Mohamud, who's making history by becoming president for the second time. He's a wise Somali elder who can work with all different peoples of Somalia.
I hope that he will create jobs for jobless young people who live in hard situations.
The president should focus on security. He should also put on trial and put before justice any government soldier that kills people without a reason.
President Mohamud has promised to unite the country and form an inclusive government. He inherits several challenges from his predecessor, Mohammed Abdullahi Mohammed, not least the worst droughts in 4 decades and frequent attacks by the militant group Al-Shabaab, which has regained territories controlled by the government in recent years.
We have been struggling to provide security to our people, open the communication channels among the people, like the highways, movement of goods and people to be easy. But we didn't reach the achievement we were expecting to reach or what we were willing because of so many other weaknesses that's not part of the security, but contributing to the delay or the failure, whatever you call. What we are going to do is now to take an experience from that past and strengthen. The capacity is there, the people are there, equipment are there. What's missing is the coordination issue.
Meanwhile, U.S. President Joe Biden has ordered the redeployment of about 500 American troops to Somalia to help the government fight Al-Shabaab. The move reverses an order by his predecessor, Donald Trump, who pulled nearly all U.S. forces from the East African nation as he sought to wind down U.S. military engagements abroad during his final weeks in office.
The purpose here is to enable a more effective fight against Al-Shabaab by local forces, and Al-Shabaab has increased in their strength and poses a heightened threat. So again, this is a repositioning of forces that are already in theater, who have traveled in and out of Somalia now on an episodic basis since January of 2021.
And let's hear more from Hassan Khannenje. He is the director of the Horn Institute for Strategic Studies. He joins me from Nairobi. Thank you so much for making our time. What can we expect from President Mohamud's return to office, and what can he change this time around?
President Mohamud's election has been a watershed moment, not just in Somalia, but actually in the region. And it's coming particularly at a critical time when Somalia was on the brink of descending into the chaos because of the political stalemate, but also the increasing threat that has ensured that not just Somalia, but the region has become increasingly fragile. One thing on the agenda that we expect President Mohamud is going to focus on is to unite a largely and heavily divided country. The election stalemate has been able to contribute to that kind of division. The second thing, I think the continuing terror threat of Al-Shabaab that is threatening the very survival of Somalia, but also ability of any government to build long-lasting institutions. And critically important, Somalia, as part of the larger Horn of Africa region, they're increasingly facing the problem of food insecurity. Now, this also compounded by the hard economic times that Somalia has witnessed in recent days and in recent months, in part also contributed by the lack of faith that international development partners have had in Somalia because of delayed elections, but also because of climate as well as dysfunctional institutions. And so, important agenda is going to be economics, security, as well as regional diplomacy that, of course, had suffered extensively during the time of President Farmajo.
So many Somalis say insecurity is the most pressing issue for them. What can President Mahmoud do to tackle it?
First of all, President Mahmoud has to work towards forming a national unified security sector. Ensure that pieces within the military actually do work, and that the center in Mogadishu can work with the periphery, which are federal member states, in ways that's going to enhance security. Because as things stand right now, part of Somalia's inability to bring about order and security is also attributed to the fact that the security sector is extremely divided, especially along clan lines. But also critically, I think the international peacekeeping forces, especially the ATMIs, will have to be required to play a more robust role in providing the technical support that is necessary, as well as equipment and training in numbers that are actually going to be sufficient. Because as we speak, outside population centers and cities, there is very little security elsewhere in the country. And the terror groups, for instance, are finding this fertile ground for recruitment, as well as ability to be able to extort resources from citizens. And so security or insecurity is a major problem in Somalia, but it's going to take a concerted effort by President Mahmoud to be able to arrive at that.
As you rightly mentioned, President Mahmoud also said he wants to strengthen the Somali National Army so they can defend the country against al-Shabaab before the African Union peacekeeping forces leave in 2024. Do you think that timeline is feasible?
The timeline right now is a little bit overly optimistic, in part because if what has taken 10 years not to be able to achieve will probably not be achieved in 4 years. However, if there's going to be a determined effort to support the development and the strengthening of Somali National Army, I think they're going to be in a better place to allow foreign forces to start exiting Somalia and perhaps to build some semblance of a functional national army as well as the police that can be able to maintain law and order and then protect Somalia against both internal as well as external threats.
Political tension between the central government and the regional member states escalated when his predecessor was in office. What does he need to do to unite the country as promised? I know you mentioned some points earlier, but this is quite important.
I think the previous president, lack of reaching out federal member states made things worse for Somalia. And so one task at hand that has to come as a matter of urgency is for President Mahmoud to reach out to federal member states, some of whose presidents were actually running for president of the republic, such as President Daniel from Puntland, for instance, reach out and find a way of working together, as well as make overtures, especially towards Somaliland, which, for much of the last 30 years has sought, to be autonomous from Somalia. Because I think it's going to be helpful to build a united country by reaching out to all those who live in it, as well as being able to respect some of the autonomies in terms of running certain affairs. But I think the future of Somalia has to be one, and not one that is divided or balkanized.
What would you say that President Mahmoud needs to do to tackle the worst drought in 4 decades?
The current drought in Somalia is a reflection of what is happening in the larger Horn of Africa region. Now, this is not a creation of Somalis, or neither will Somalis themselves be able to have a solution in isolation. I think it's going to be important that the international community and Somalis' friends and partners are able to, especially in the first 2 years, provide some kind of economic assistance in terms of food aid, even as they work towards trying to boost agriculture that has been neglected in part because of the war, of course, as well as the famine that's now ravaging, the entire territory. But that economic assistance and food aid is going to be critical in the first few years. But then also investing in terms of long-term sustainable agriculture is going to be important for future food security for Somalia and for the region.
Well, thank you so much, Hassan Khannenje, the director of the Horn of Africa Institute. Thank you so much for speaking with us.
Thanks for having me.
We have more stories coming up for you here on Africa Matters, including...
I'm Columbus Mavunga in Zimbabwe, where the government says it can provide a solution to the global wheat shortage.
The cost of basic products in Zimbabwe has risen sharply due to Russia's war in Ukraine. The price of bread has doubled, which the government blames on the suspension of wheat exports from the war-torn region. Inflation has also spiked to almost 100%, sparking fears of a return to hyperinflation. As Columbus Mavunga reports from Harare, authorities are calling for farmers to intensify wheat production as the planting season starts.
High rates of unemployment and poverty mean many Zimbabweans struggle to make ends meet at the best of times. With the cost of living on the rise, it is becoming more difficult for people to meet their basic needs.
We're really hustling since most commodities, including bread, have become more expensive. We keep telling ourselves that there is nothing we can do, but this time things are really hard. I've just left OK, and the prices are increasing again.
The grain millers of Zimbabwe says the steep rise in the cost of bread in this southern African nation is being caused by events thousands of kilometers away.
65% of the wheat that we import is coming from Russia and Ukraine. So as early as November last year, we were unable to load wheat from that region because the political tensions have gone high and insurers had revoked their coverage.
He added that most of the country's wheat comes from the embattled Ukrainian city of Mariupol. Since Russia launched its attack on Ukraine, the price of wheat has soared the world over. In Zimbabwe, the price of bread has more than doubled, and the government says it can provide a solution to the global wheat shortage under the theme, Wheat Self-Sufficient at All Costs.
We are going on a blitz to train wheat farmers to be able to grow the wheat. And this brings together all players in the wheat value chain, the input suppliers, the chemical people, the mechanical people, and also the harvesting people to come together and ensure that we are able to really have the hectarage plowed up and also support the production of the crop.
The aim is to harvest about 75,000 hectares of wheat by October this year, achieving self-sufficiency for the country. Farmer Ephraim Paspanojga has increased his wheat crop this season by more than 50%.
This area looks like one of the prime areas which has got all the water and also electricity for us to be in a position to produce the wheat crop, which is one of our major crops and one of our other crops that normally is actually imported. So for import substitution, I think it's one of the major things that we need to also concentrate on production of wheat.
The increase in wheat production means Zimbabwe will be cutting down its staple crop maize, but it will hopefully end its reliance on imports from the troubled European region.
Columbus Mavunga, Africa Matters, Harare, Zimbabwe.
In northeast Nigeria, a new international initiative is teaching displaced people how to identify and avoid explosive devices. It's based in Borno State, which shares a border with Niger, Cameroon, and Chad, and has been the center of the insurgency led by the Boko Haram terror group and its affiliates. The UN says conflict has left about 300,000 people dead and 2.7 million displaced, but international aid organizations are now helping make them safe. Shoaib Hassan has the details.
A lesson that could be the difference between life and death. At this improvised classroom in Borno, students are shown slides about various explosive devices and how to identify and avoid them.
Most of the beneficiaries in the camps in Borno, or all displaced people in Borno entirely, they are farmers. Some are firewood vendors, some are hunters. And all these people used to go to the bush and get their livelihood activities. And these bushes are placed at the battlefield during this insurgency for the past 8 years. So they used to get in contact with this ARW in the community.
Jantiku speaks from personal experience. In 2014, he picked up a bomb from the scene of a battle between the army and Boko Haram to hand it over to security forces. A village elder saw him and ordered him to put it down immediately. The incident, which could have been disastrous, inspired him to join the program run by the Mines and Advisory Group organization. The group has been active since 1989 and has helped over 19 million people in 68 countries rebuild their lives and livelihoods after war. And it's now active along with other NGOs in conflict-torn areas in this part of Africa.
I appreciate it very much. It helps us to educate ourselves and our children. Even when we see these things on the farm, we will show it to the authorities for them to take the necessary actions.
With violence declining, authorities want to disband the camps, which means hundreds of people returning to their homes. But many refugees are reluctant and scared. The initiative is helping them adjust back to normal life.
If we are to go back to our villages now, then I sincerely see it as forced eviction. We left our villages because of conflict, and the problems are still there. MAG's contribution in this camp is that they gather us district by district and enlighten us on what to do or avoid when we eventually go back to our villages.
The essential skills learned here could be pivotal in helping the people of Borno live safe and secure lives. Shoaib Hassan, Africa Matters.
You're watching Africa Matters, and here is a roundup of other stories making news across the continent. Mozambique has declared a polio outbreak after detecting its first case of the virus in nearly 3 decades. The World Health Organization says it was detected in a child living in the northeastern Tete region who began experiencing the onset of paralysis towards the end of March. It's the second imported case of wild poliovirus in southern Africa this year, following an outbreak in Malawi in February. Mass vaccinations targeting millions of children across southern Africa are now underway. One of Kenya's top presidential candidates, Raila Odinga, has chosen a woman to serve as his running mate ahead of August poll. Martha Karua, who is a lawyer and former justice minister, could become Kenya's first female deputy president if the pair win the election. She's earned the title Iron Lady, being principled and outspoken during her rise through the male-dominated ranks of Kenyan politics. Meanwhile, Odinga's rival, Deputy President William Ruto, picked a former aide-turned-fierce critic of President Uhuru Kenyatta, Rigathi Gachagua, to be his running mate. The World Bank has given Ethiopia a $300 million grant for reconstruction and recovery in conflict areas. Since late 2020, the war in northern Ethiopia has killed thousands of civilians, pushing others on the brink of famine and devastated infrastructure. Following a ceasefire in March, there has been an uneasy truce, and people in the region have been left without basic services like education, health, and water supply. Eritrean Binyam Gamay has made history as the first Black African to win a Grand Tour stage in the Giro d'Italia. He described his win as unbelievable, but he had to pull out of the race a day later after he hit himself in the eye with a cork on the podium. Gamay, who is 22 years old, already made history this season by becoming the first Black African to win at Belgium's Gent-Wevelgem Classic in March. According to the World Health Organization, 57% of those who died of COVID-19 during the first 2 years of the pandemic were men. Scientists say a number of factors are behind the lower number of deaths among women, which has left a large population of widows around the world, particularly in parts of Africa. Andrew Hopkins reports.
Vanessa Emedi is still mourning the death of her husband from COVID-19. He was a prominent scholar in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. But soon after he died, she was forced to move from the family home. She says his family took over a bank account set up for her son, who she still looks after.
I'm trained in IT management, but now I find myself selling down the market because I struggle to find a job. So I said to myself, entrepreneurship is also a way of earning money.
Vanessa is like many women across the globe who have been forced to take on extra work after their partner's death from COVID-19. In some parts of the world, in-laws can claim custody of children or refuse to help them, and widows can be disinherited or mistreated. More than 70% of reported COVID-19 deaths in the Democratic Republic of the Congo were men. That's according to the Sex, Gender and COVID-19 Project. There are similar figures in Chad, Malawi and Somalia, and in Nigeria too, where Anayo Mba lives. She gave birth to her 6th child just before her husband died. She now has 4 jobs to be able to look after her family.
My husband's family said even if I have to go and remarry, that I should go and do so. But the summary is that the earlier I leave the house, the better for me and my children. If I stay here, I will suffer more.
All of which has left many women looking for not just spiritual guidance, but also practical help, including how to obtain food and support to make sure they and their children have a better future. Andrew Hopkins, Africa Matters.
Madagascar is rich in animal and plant species. Many are found nowhere else in the world, but the climate crisis has led to the drought on the world's 4th largest island. Greenland has turned brown. Poverty and hunger are rising. According to the UN, nearly half of all children under 5 are malnourished. But as Daniel Padwick reports, one NGO has found a solution.
Kazi Zanapanijo has 10 children, and it's often been hard to feed them all in Madagascar. The island has suffered years of droughts and crop failures, but her family hasn't had to worry about that since they started growing pigeon peas.
During harvest season, the kids and I will come collect everything together, and that will be our food. Once we harvest everything, we start to cultivate again.
Pigeon peas, also known as cajanus, are drought resistant. The legume are also high in protein, are cheap to grow and enrich farmland by putting nitrogen back into the soil. The idea to plant them come from a non-governmental organisation called the Agroecological Technical Centre of the South. It's helping farmers make the switch from more traditional crops like corn and sweet potatoes.
Farmers saw the cajanus trees and they realized they were working well. They also saw the soil wasn't being blown away by the wind. They also realized they could earn good money with cajanus.
The yields have been good enough that farmers like Kazi Zanapanijo have been able to sell some of their crop. The income has improved their lives and their farmers.
My family and I built this rainwater reservoir. We used to have to walk to the coast to get water. It was very far and tiring. When we started to sell pigeon peas, we decided to build this reservoir.
People who once had to eat cacti and other wild plants to survive when their crops failed now find themselves with money in their pockets. Daniel Padwick, Africa Matters.
This week we explore Kara in northern Togo. It is a good base for trips to Tambama Valley, which is a unique collection of fortress-like mud houses listed as a World Heritage Site by the United Nations Cultural Agency, UNESCO. That's our show this week. Please share your thoughts and suggestions about the stories you've seen on this episode, or ideas on what you would like us to cover on Twitter using the hashtag #AfricaMatters. Please feel free to reach out to me on my personal handle at @DeshawaJosh. You can watch this episode and more on YouTube. Just search Africa Matters TRT World. Like, comment, and share. I will see you next week.